have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis plaguing much of the world. And tonight we're going to do some interesting talking about one of the main factors responsible for the character crisis, and that is our culture of narcissism and entitlement. It's something I blogged about once again on my personal blog, which I invite you to visit at www.manipulative-people.com. I also blog at www.counselingwith2lsresource.com. Once again, those blogs are www.manipulative-people.com and counselingresource.com, counselingwith2lsresource.com, for my weekly blog posts. And also invite you to familiarize yourself with my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, and The Judas Syndrome, written primarily for the Christian faith community. All these books are my best effort to explain the character crisis that we find ourselves in, what's responsible for it, what we need to do about it, and especially how to get some help if you happen to be in a relationship with a character-impaired individual. So that's been the thrust of my work for the last almost 30 years, and I invite you to make yourself available of the weekly blog posts and the books, and also tune into this program every week at 7 o'clock in the evening on Sundays, Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Pacific Time, 6 o'clock Central Time, where we talk about the character crisis and various topics related to it. And if you want to join the discussion tonight, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about our culture of narcissism and especially entitlement. We're going to especially be wanting to talk about just what it is about the cultural climate of today that fosters such a sense of entitlement and fosters the narcissism that we see so rampantly these days, that's eroded our communities and that has led to so many of our social problems, so many of our problems in relationships. And so if you have something you'd like to contribute, or if you have a question you want to ask, maybe you have a story you want to share, please join the conversation at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Happy to take your call. Happy to have you share your thoughts. Happy to take your questions. Um, Interesting article, I believe. You'll find it interesting that I posted on my manipulativepeople.com blog this past Friday. Uh, many years ago, back in the mid 90s, when I started doing workshops and when I first published the first edition of In Sheep's Clothing, I was saying some things about character disturbance and some things especially about narcissism and narcissistic behavior, and especially about narcissistic personalities that was not popular at the time because it went against the grain of traditional thought. You know, back before psychology became a much more empirically rigorous field of study, we had all of these theories about human behavior that really couldn't be tested. Sigmund Freud and his followers, they had devised these thoughts about how the inner mind worked, and there was really no way to test these things empirically. A lot of their conjectures were just that. They were conjectures. This theory seemed to explain a lot, but there was no way to validate empirically how sound the constructs were. So, we just took these things at face value. We took them for granted. We believed in them. We preached a lot of things that we held to be true without a lot of empirical backing. Well, many of my clinician colleagues and I, we began to notice some things in our practices that went against the grain, that went against all we had been taught, basically, about human nature and what makes it work. We were trained, basically, to deal with folks who were making themselves sick, literally, with anxiety and insecurity, basically their repressed feelings and their insecurities and their low self-esteem and their unconscious fears were making a wreck of them, and therapy, as traditionally devised, was an ideal venue for them to kind of come into contact with their repressed selves and sort through their repressed feelings and uncover their unspoken and unconscious fears and anxieties, basically get to know themselves at a deeper level. And in these insight-oriented approaches, folks came to understand themselves and what made them do the self-destructive things that they did. Well, this is all great if, in fact, you're dealing with somebody who is riddled with fears and insecurities and who is repressing a lot of emotion and dealing with unconscious fears. This is a great tool to help them heal. Problem is that what we began seeing as our culture changed dramatically from a repressive culture that fosters insecurities, that fosters hang-ups, that fosters repression of feelings, we changed from a repressive culture to a permissive culture. And we also changed into a morally relativistic culture. And we also changed into a culture of entitlement. And because of that, what therapists were being asked to deal with most of the time, somebody would say to a character impaired person, a person who just didn't seem to get it, a person who was treating their spouse badly or their children badly or was behaving badly, drinking too much, um, cursing too much, lying, thieving, and cheating too much, whatever the case may be, uh, somebody would say to this person, "You need therapy," and drag them into the therapist's office and expect the therapist to somehow fix them with approaches that were designed not to fix character immaturity or character impairment, but with approaches that were designed to deal with too much repression, too much anxiety, too much insecurity, the thing that we so politely call neurosis, or as I term it in my book, In Sheep's Clothing, and in my book, Character Disturbance. This is what we used to treating, but now all of a sudden we were treating individuals who were behaving badly. And the way it turned out is that none of the ways that we had to help folks did any good. So we really couldn't help, let alone fix, quote unquote, these folks who were bad actors, so to speak. And so we had to develop new approaches. And eventually a model came into existence that we call the cognitive behavioral paradigm. And this is a paradigm which basically says that people behave in ways that are an outgrowth from the attitudes they hold and the core beliefs that they hold. In other words, how you think about things, how you think about the world in general, how you think about your place in it, the attitudes you hold about the best ways to deal with the world, those beliefs, those core attitudes and beliefs, they predict fairly well how you will act. And if your behavior is a problem, then what you really need to take a look at is not so much your deeply repressed feelings, but the screwy way in which you tend to think about things. Your stinking thinking, so to speak, as the folks in AA are wont to say. So a whole new therapy was born, a whole new type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's the treatment of choice when it comes to dealing with character disturbance. Now, a lot of therapists say they understand that, and they also say that they do cognitive behavioral therapy, but I'm here to tell you, folks, that many therapists really haven't a clue how to actually implement the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. Many times they have a bit of a clue when it comes to the cognitive component. But when it comes to the behavioral component, many times they are very lacking. So it's still difficult these days, even though it's better than it used to be, it's still difficult to get the kind of help that really makes a difference when you're dealing with someone of impaired character. And one of the things that's really tough to deal with, and that's the topic of tonight's program and the topic of the blog posts that I have recently posted, especially on my blog at manipulative-people.com. One thing that's really tough to deal with is narcissism. You know, we used to think that narcissists were inherently insecure individuals who compensated for underlying and unconscious feelings of insecurity and an anxiousness about themselves and their worth by putting on a facade of greatness, of a bravado, of confidence. They acted all that, but underneath it, they really didn't feel all that. That's how we traditionally thought. And there's been a study done that that recognizes that in fact there can be a type of narcissism that is the more neurotic variety. The study that defined the two types of anxiety is in the Psychological Bulletin, Volume 10. It's online. Uh, it was published online on the 29th of December. Um, and it's worth reading. It's worth reading because it mentions that while there is this type of narcissism out there, the more prevalent kind of narcissism, and this is what I've been saying for many, many years, including those early years in the 90s when people thought basically that I was kind of off my rocker. The more prevalent kind of narcissism are the folks who think they're all that. They really do. I mean, they don't just act all that. They really do believe in their greatness, even if it's not justified. Sometimes they have something to show for themselves. Sometimes they don't. But they really do think way too much of themselves. So much so that they can't have enough care and concern about other people to function well in society and to function well in a relationship. They don't have enough care. They don't have enough empathy. They don't have enough concern for the welfare of others. They're so self-centered. They're so self-focused. They're so egocentric. They can't look outside of themselves and their own wants and their own needs. It's all about them. And there isn't any anxious insecurity underlying all of this. They really do think they're all that. And what's worse is they really do feel entitled to do whatever they please. And when you have a narcissistic person in a relationship, that relationship is bound to be a living hell. I know some of you folks out there know what this is like, and I know perhaps this caller has something to share about that. So we'll take this call and see. Hello, and welcome to Character Matters.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Okay, I have some questions.
Sure.
So, I don't know, 5 years ago I read, you had a website, I don't know if it was called Manipulative People yet, but I Googled stuff and you came up, and that's when I first heard the term Character Matters, or character, talking about disturbed character, I guess is the term I'm talking about. And you said if you are with a disturbed character person, get out, because there's no fixing them.
Well, in extreme cases, yes. Not always, but in extreme cases, yes. As you know, in my books and on my online articles, I say that character disturbance exists along a spectrum.
Right.
We know that now about autistic disorders as well, and we know that actually about several disorders, that they exist along a spectrum. And so if somebody is a little bit character disordered, so to speak, it's not absolutely necessary to get out, but you sure do need to get the right kind of help, and sometimes that can be really hard to find.
Okay, yeah. So that's my issue. So I'm no longer with my husband. I'm nowhere near divorced because they don't. There's money issues and businesses, so that's not to his advantage. So there's lots of games going on to do that, to get divorced. So
yes.
He's controlling all the finances, so he doesn't want to be divorced.
Yes.
He just wants to have his new life, and he basically discarded me, like everything sort of says. But anyhow, at one time we did go to counseling, and then he got caught still in his relationship with a woman he'd been with for 3 years. So then he didn't want to go to counseling anymore. And
you mean in counseling it came out that he was conducting this relationship?
Oh, no, I already knew. Like, I had busted it, in 2010. And then he swore it wasn't happening anymore, and on it went. But he would never, what I would call, put the cards on the table.
Uh-huh.
And,
You mean he was lying?
yeah, he was still lying, like,
Yeah.
about everything.
Yeah, and let me, can I say a word about that?
Yeah.
One of the things that happens in traditional therapy is therapists are trained about this thing that we call denial.
Mm-hmm.
I've written several articles about this, and you'll see a lot
Yes, you have.
in
I've
my,
read everything you've written.
and you know, the thinking from a therapist's point of view is that there's so much shame and there's so much guilt operating with the person that they can't bear to face the truth. So the reason they misrepresent things and they don't come clean and they don't show their full hand is because they're too ashamed, they're too guilty, and so you have to kind of treat them with kid gloves. You can't confront them. You have to gently nurse them to a point where they can overcome their denial, and then they'll finally come clean. This is the traditional thinking. And many times, what happens in therapy, unfortunately, is that the character disturbed person just strings both the therapist and the aggrieved spouse along for a long, long time. And then when the crap finally hits the fan, uh, it's pretty much over.
Okay, so he was doing that. So so he admitted. He said, "I admit that I had this girlfriend, and I admit all that. So what do you want from me? I've admitted it. It's out there. I've told you that it existed. I told you it's over." And so then it started to be about me, of course.
Excuse me, how did you answer that?
I could write a movie as to how it all went, but okay, I said, I need to know it is over. I need proof that it is over. He tracked my vehicle for 4 years, like the whole time it was going on, so that he could explain to me where he was, right? So if I had driven by his office or stopped at his office, 20 minutes later I'd get a phone call saying, "Oh, I just got back to the office," because he knew where I was. He knew I'd be back home or I was nowhere near there. Mm-hmm. I just got back to the office and they said, "You came by." But it was just a space he was renting. It wasn't like his own, he was only renting an office within a business.
Mm-hmm.
So, these people had their own, they didn't have a receptionist or anything. Like, they had their own business going on. I'm pretty sure that they didn't even see me or know that I was around. Mm-hmm. So I would say to him, "Really? Like, who told you I'd been by there? Like, who saw me?" And he'd go, "Oh, Brian or Bill or whatever." So I'd be like, "Oh, okay, whatever." So it took me a little bit to figure out. And then one day I just knew in my head that he had a tracking device on me. So I took it to get my car to get an oil change, and left my cell phone in the car, and borrowed a car and a cell phone, and I went to learn about tracking devices so that I would know, how to find it in my car. But in the meantime, it was up on a hoist, so I told the garage to find the device. He hadn't found it yet. It ended up being where the jack is kept. I drive a van, a Toyota van. It ended up being where the jack is kept. And before the mechanic found it, my husband had arrived and got something out of the back of the van, out of there, and put it in his pocket. Anyway, it's a very convoluted.
Wow. Wow.
He had recording devices in behind the fans in my van. He had recording devices in my house that were like pens.
You're talking about manipulation on steroids here, aren't you?
Well, I think so. So the counselor that we saw never really, I phoned him one time. We saw him only 4 times. I phoned him after the 3rd time, and I said, "Are you going to call him on any of this stuff?" Like.
And what did the therapist say?
And he said, "I can't because he won't come back."
Yeah, I see. This is exactly my point. You just nailed it. And this is the traditional bias. You see, we have to set a stage we've been taught this. We have to set a stage by which the person feels safe, you see, to let
Right,
down their so-called defenses. And
right.
if you move too hard, too fast, they will become too intimidated, too afraid, too defensive, quote unquote, and they'll bolt. Well, the fact is that they'll only play you otherwise. And the fact is, they might just go bolt out of therapy, and that's your proof that they don't mean to change and that you're better off without them. So,
Okay, so you think that that makes sense from the outside. Now, so he got caught still, like the. So his girlfriend was married still, and I had contacted that man in 2010 and told him that his wife was having an affair with my husband. This is, the counseling was happening in 2012 because he got caught again. He took her to I live in Canada. He took her to San Francisco on a so-called, it was a business trip he told me he was going on, and I tried to investigate what he was going to do. I told him, oh, well, who's paying for the ticket? He said, this company. And I said, well, they must have sent you emailed you the information. Well, of course, he could never get the email up on his phone, and he could never get he wasn't sending me the email, and why would I need that anyway? And, oh, God. Anyway, he on and on this went. So that woman's husband caught, when she came back, he had figured out what was going on. He found my husband's Visa card in her wallet. He figured it all out at that point. So they were going to try to make their marriage better. Put their marriage back together. We were going to try to put our marriage back together. They were not going to see one another again. Of course, 6 weeks later, after we've been going to counseling, for 4 or 5 times we had gone, the husband uncovers communications between them again. Now, my husband did this, all his communications on his phone, which he had locked, or at his office, so that I couldn't access it.
mm,
And so that man, that the husband of the girlfriend, phoned me because we were now in contact since this San Francisco thing. So when they got caught again, so then my husband would not go back to the counseling. Told me it was, he wasn't seeing her. That was on and on and on it went. So, against my better judgment, we have 3 children. I've been with him for 27 years. Things have we're sort of, when he started his own business, he became, really an asshole. And I would say, why are you being this way? He'd hang up on me, tell me, shut up. And I'd say, that's not us. Like, why are you treating me like that?
mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
oh, you make a big deal of everything. Whack,
Yeah.
hang the phone up. I'd phone him back. Why are you hanging up on me? I phoned for a reason, Like, it just went, you're bothering me. I'm busy. I'm always busy. He was always busy. He was always important. He was becoming more and more and more important.
One of the things that I speak about at length in my articles and in my book is where the responsibility lies to repair damage in these kinds of abusive relationships. It's always on the character impaired person. If they breach the trust, they've got to repair the trust. They did the damage, they have to repair the damage. And the problem is that they actually kind of sucker you into doing all the work,
Oh, absolutely.
and not just the physical work, the mental work, worrying about things, the emotional work. You get so consumed with, are they doing this? Are they doing that? Are they really telling me the truth and whatnot? And they don't feel the burden. They don't feel the burden of what they don't accept the burden either of what they have to do to earn back the trust. And
Not do they care?
and that comment that you mentioned is so typical, that what do you want me to do? Kind of like they don't already know. They don't know. It's like they're pretending like they don't already know what it would take to build back trust. they certainly know what they would demand if the shoe were on the other foot and somebody had betrayed their trust. They
Oh yeah.
know exactly what they would demand of the other person. So,
Well, no, actually, I got. If you had had an affair, I would be over it by now.
oh, good tactic. Good
Yeah.
tactic. Did you believe that?
I just laughed. I said, "Yeah, well, your affair is not over." So,
Yeah,
you're making that up, and
yeah,
oh my God, I could write a book.
yeah.
So
Well,
my question, so I continually second guess myself. He's been gone 22 months. He left myself and that girlfriend for yet another girlfriend.
why is that
A
a
woman
surprise?
that he had a past with came into the picture, and so he dumped both me and the girlfriend for this one.
Hmm.
Um,
So, what's your question?
so and I didn't know that I had read about your character disturbance. I had just read this paragraph or whatever it was on the computer. I printed it, so I have it somewhere. But there wasn't all this information that comes up on the computer now. And your website wasn't as developed, and I don't think anyway at the time. And so my struggle. So I didn't know about narcissism. And I'm a middle-aged woman. We didn't talk about narcissists, and that's a newer thing that people talk about. And so this counselor we saw together. I went to him after he left. He said, "Your husband is a narcissist without any doubt in my mind. You need to learn about narcissism," which is when I started learning and reading on the internet. And I got your book. That's when I learned all the stuff I've learned. And then I went back to him because I then found out that he had actually left for this third woman. And, I wasn't handling it very well. And he said, "Your husband is a psychopath." I can't give you, I'm not going to say I'm diagnosing that because it's a huge diagnosis. But I have met very few people that are to the extreme of him. And he is a psychopath. Mm-hmm. You need to learn more about psychopaths. So
Now,
I had read and read.
this is the same therapist that told you that?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And do you know the difference between your garden variety narcissist and a psychopath?
No, to be honest, it's very foggy.
Well, let me make this. I'll oversimplify it just a little bit for the benefit of
Okay.
the listeners, because
Okay.
I have several articles on narcissism and malignant narcissism, which is the characteristic that psychopaths have.
Right.
But most narcissists have a limited degree of empathy. In other words, they have a limited capacity to care for others. And they're so self-focused that they just don't give much care to others' welfare. Psychopaths, on the other hand, have a very malignant form of narcissism. Uh, they have a marked deficiency in empathy. Either they have no capacity for empathy at all. In other words, the way their brains work, they can't even experience empathy. Or if they have a little bit of it, or if they have some capacity for it, they have this incredible ability to turn it off, just like a light switch. We call it compartmentalization. They can just completely wall it off. And that enables them to use and exploit others at will without any compunction, without any nervousness, without any hesitation. They just basically use people. And not all psychopaths are predators or criminals. A higher percentage than normal of criminals are psychopaths, but psychopaths can also be heads of corporations. They can be entrepreneurs. They can be the person next door. What really defines them is the absence of empathy that leads them to callously and senselessly, and here's the key word, remorselessly use and abuse others. They don't have any compunction about it. They go through people like water. Why is it any surprise that he's already found somebody new? It's no surprise if he's a psychopath. Now,
Well, he left for her, like, and she brought money to the game, so she elevated him just a little bit higher, right? Than he was already at.
yeah. Well, I have to say, true psychopathy is very rare. Is pretty a rare phenomenon. Most of the time, folks with character disturbance fall somewhere on the spectrum, and there are some narcissists who are pretty severe narcissists, but they're still not quite psychopaths.
Right.
So, we can't do any kind of formal assessment over the air here, but suffice it to say that there's enough character disturbance out there, and narcissism is one of the big factors in it. I'd like your opinion on something, though, because tonight's program is about the kinds of things in our culture that foster these attitudes that lead to this sense of entitlement and these egocentric patterns. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on what you think it might be about today's culture that seems to be creating this climate where we have so many narcissists in our midst. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, so my mother-in-law told her children, and now they came, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in my husband's behaviors, we'll say. So he came from a broken family. And my mother-in-law would tell my husband that he did not, as he was growing up, that respect wasn't important, that people had to show him respect first.
Ah.
And to me, it's all about respect.
Yeah, there's the
And
entitlement right there. Yeah.
and
I have to say, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute here. I have to
yep,
say, I encountered this attitude among the most hardened criminals in prison. Um, this respect on demand attitude. Respect is one of those things that, in my opinion, based on years of clinical experience, is the thing that most needs to be, and I'll be careful about this word, earned. Now, treating someone civilly with due regard, that's another matter. We all deserve to be treated civilly. But affording someone respect needs to be earned. And how we earn it, the word respect, I define it actually in my books. It comes from the Latin to look back. We get the word spectacles from the verb spectere. Respect means to look back on what you have done with what you have been given. And if you've done a good job with the talents that you've been given, making a valid contribution, a valuable contribution to the world, and conducting yourself in an appropriate manner, in a noble and in a manner of integrity, of character. If you've done that, then you have every reason to hold yourself in high regard, and other people will also afford you that respect as well. But it's something you have to earn.
so is that not something that it's also taught?
Oh, you bet. And any parent that gives that message that you're quote unquote entitled to respect just because you walk the planet is helping to create a future narcissist without a
I believe
question.
that. Because I personally feel that, like, he didn't respect elders. Now, I was taught, for the most part, people's grandmas and grandpas, you respected them until you encountered some reason not to.
Yes.
He couldn't stand old people.
Yeah, this is
They
something
were like
this is something I write
bothering the
about
space he
too.
was in.
This is something I write about in the book about the difference between narcissists and antisocial characters is that narcissists don't recognize any higher power. In other words, there is no power or authority greater than them. As far as they're concerned, they're it. Whereas antisocial personalities, they recognize higher powers or authority, but they are at war with them. So they're kind of out to defeat them, out to beat the man, so to speak. But narcissists, they don't even recognize higher powers or authority. As far as they're concerned, they're it.
But there are instances that they are forced to recognize them because it's obvious that that person is in a higher, place than them. Either, but it doesn't. They show them no, on the inside they show them no respect. Like only to not look bad to other people do they act like, yes, this is my boss, or this is the president of the company, so I have to act like.
Right. We call this the tactic of giving assent. Narcissists will give assent. In other words, they will kind of go along. They will see a practical need to kind of cave in to somebody else's external demands, but in their heart of heart, they really do not respect the authority of anyone else. Whether they're older, wiser, more experienced, it doesn't matter. They may give surface level assent, but in their heart of hearts, they do not see it that way. And it's a tactic, it's a habitual behavior that blocks their ability to have any real respect for any higher power or authority.
So, and that I think, I have 3 children, and I do not, the jury's sort of out still on whether this kind of can come up through genetics or not. How much is learned and how much is nature, like how much comes genetically to them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have. I don't recall reading too much about that.
Yeah, I speak about that at length in my book Character Disturbance. I speak about that at length.
Oh, you do?
And as far as we know,
I have read it.
and as far as we know, I mean, it is a mixture of both, and also it varies from person to person, which is the stronger influence. I know individuals who have come out of the worst environments, who are unbelievably good character. I find myself scratching my head and I say to myself, how did they turn out so decent given what they came out of? And then I've seen some people come out of the very best environments, had every good kind of upbringing you could think of, and they were just rotten to the core. So how big a factor nature plays over environment, it varies from person to person. It's always a mixture of both. Some folks, however, appear to be kind of hardwired, and other folks appear to be have been more shaped by their environment. Both are important, and it just depends on the individual. Each individual is different. Yeah. Well, I certainly hope that things are better for you now. I certainly hope the material that I have out there online and in my books has helped you some. Has it?
Yes. What it has helped is because I've been told for the last for sure the last 15 years of my life that I didn't measure up.
Yeah.
Everything I did was measured.
Yeah.
I didn't clean the house well enough. Everything I did was measured. Where I was, how long I talked on the phone, whether I should be talking on the phone, whether I made enough food for dinner. On and on it went.
Yeah.
It was constant measuring. So reading all your material helps put it in perspective. It helps you understand that these people actually do exist, that, someone like you doing mega research and giving all your experiences with these kind of people, and it sort of validates you a little bit in your are you crazy? Is it your fault? Is it truly all these things that you've done wrong?
Right.
So
you recognize these things as tactics now, and you recognize that in that narcissism, naturally everybody's going to be looked at as inferior and never able to measure up, because nobody could come up to the standard that they set. There's another great psychologist by the name of Stanton Samanow who has a perfect descriptor line for these folks, and that they are legends in their own minds.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
That's how my brothers describe him, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that things are better for you. I'm so glad that the information I have out there has helped you, and I thank you for sharing your thoughts on one of the things you think fosters narcissism. I certainly agree.
What I wouldn't mind seeing from you actually is a little bit more information about how you can maybe make sure you're not fostering narcissism.
Oh, now you're kind of leading.
Try not to.
Yeah, now you're kind of leading into the best part of my book, Character Disturbance. In Character Disturbance, I have what I call the 10 Commandments of Character Development.
Yes, you do. Okay.
These are the things that you have to teach successfully a child in order to have them develop decent character. And one of the first things is that they're not entitled to anything. That this whole life is a gift. Well, however you want to see it. If you want to be completely secular about it, if you want to be completely agnostic about it, this life is a miraculous gift of nature. Nobody earned it. There's not a person born on the planet that said, okay, I've done this and this and this and this and this, now I deserve to be born. It's a gift. You're either going to see it secularly as a miracle of nature, a benign and wonderful and fortuitous accident of nature, or if you're a person of faith, you're going to see it as a gift from God, from the creative force of this universe. And if in seeing this gift you feel beholden, you feel indebted, you feel grateful for this gift, then you don't take anything for granted, and you feel obligated to make of this life something that honors the gift giver. This is so essential to character formation. All the major faiths in the world have known this forever, which is why they incorporate something in their belief system to address this issue. There is nothing more fundamental to character formation than that. And parents who give their children messages that they are so special, or that they are God's gift, or that they don't owe anything, or that this life is not a miracle to be treasured and valued, they're going to raise a narcissist. There's no question about it.
In my mother-in-law's case, like in my husband's case, I believe he was one of the few divorced, kids from a divorced family in a Catholic school. In our school system is public and Catholic, and it's basically all public, but for whatever reason we have two systems. Anyway, so in a Catholic school there weren't as many divorces in the 70s when his parents got divorced, and so he was one of the few. So in my thought process when she told me that, because I said, he doesn't respect anything. Like, this is after we're married, and I'm like, what? Where is this? There's no respect. Like, he doesn't even respect her.
Mm-hmm.
And she, I think, was trying to make up for the fact that he was different than the any other kids. He didn't have two parents at home. He had parents that had two houses. He was going back and forth between homes.
Mm-hmm.
With a brother. He had a younger brother as well.
Well, there's almost always a reason, but there are some essential things that we must do in rearing children, and regard for this wonderful gift that is life, and a deeply felt obligation. Once again, I'll quote Stanton Samanow here because he's one of the great thinkers of our time when it comes to character disturbance. But he said of all of the characteristics that people who do bad things have, the deficient sense of obligation is probably the most telling and the most predictive of dysfunction. In other words, if there's no feelings of obligation that I owe something, that I have a debt to pay, and that it's my responsibility to make of myself the kind of person that will make a positive contribution, not just to my relationship, but to the society at large. If I don't have that sense of obligation, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And that has to be nurtured very early on. From the earliest days, you can never start too early with a child because children are natural narcissists. From the very minute they're born, they think the world revolves around them. And they think that others are there to meet their needs. They have to learn differently. They have to learn that basically they're entitled to nothing, and that everything that comes their way in a positive way, even the love they get from loving parents like that, it's a gift to be treasured and to feel indebted about. So that there's this sense of obligation to give back, to do good likewise, to make of yourself the kind of person who is going to make the world a better place.
Now, do you find teenagers lose a little bit of that for a little bit?
They lose more than a little bit of it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're of this thought that this is an inevitable fact of teenage years. Frankly, it's not. It's cultural. There are cultures, there are even primitive cultures, where the kinds of things our teens go through are not things that teens have to go through. This is a cultural phenomenon, and we are not going to solve our character problem any other way than by looking at the aspects of our culture, especially the rampant messages of entitlement. Oh my gosh, in the media especially, we are just inundated with these messages of entitlement and messages of permissiveness and messages of grandiosity and exhibitionism. With the advent of social media especially, everybody just wants to toot their own horn and basically show themselves off. So
you hear all the time, whatever makes you happy.
Yes.
You have to be happy.
Right. Yeah. And you're entitled.
At the expense of others.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're only going to fix the problem by tending to those things. We had some institutions for a long time, for many years, for many decades. Some institutions were in place that helped our culture and our society foster character. And a lot of those institutions are crumbling. I'll give you an example. Sports. Sports was a great character formation vehicle. It's become one of the most self-aggrandizing kind of things you can have. From the soccer moms who all of the kids are special and they all deserve to play and they all deserve this and they all deserve that, to the professional sports where these folks who have talent are paid incredible sums of money
Oh, yeah.
for their talent, and how miserably they behave and what horrible role modeling they give is given a pass because they're so valuable to the team because of their talent. This would, you know, I'm old and I'm 67 years old. I remember when people were just gone from professional football teams, and they were gone in a heartbeat for much, much less now that even warrants a fine.
Yeah.
And not only that, when they get fined, they want to sue.
And
They think it's
they're
unfair.
successful.
Yeah, they think it's unfair.
Hmm.
It's unbelievable. So that's one of the just one of the many institutions that we've allowed to crumble that was designed basically to foster character. Sports in junior high and high school were a great way to develop a sense of teamwork, camaraderie, uh, of personal goal setting, of respect for authority,
Yeah.
a valuing of hard work and effort. None of these things apply anymore, and it's a tragedy. Uh, it's a tragedy of great proportion because not only have the institutions eroded, but the character that they used to foster has eroded, and it's costing us our freedom dearly. You know,
But
we're
that's
running.
the entitled middle-aged people that have done that.
Yeah, we're running close to the end of the hour here. So if you have something else you'd like to share or another question you'd like to ask, I invite you to do that now.
Well, you know what? I actually wanted to know a little bit about your thoughts on how to not second guess yourself about everything I read, and how it applies and where it applies with me.
Uh huh.
But it's a little complicated. So maybe I'll listen in another time and maybe broach that at another time.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for calling in and sharing your thoughts. And I hope the discussion has helped you out a bit.
Yes, it does.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Well, we're coming near the end of another hour here. This hour seemed to pass quite quickly tonight. And I invite you once again to go online and read the articles posted online, both on the counseling with 2ls.resource.com blog site, as well as my own personal blog at www.manipulative-people.com. Hundreds of articles there on character disturbance, narcissism, borderline personalities, antisocial characters, psychopaths, the whole 9 yards. You'll find it all there. You'll learn the tools of empowerment, also my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, The Judas Syndrome, and Character Disturbance, the phenomenon of our age. Available everywhere, downloadable on audio books as well. Avail yourself of them and all the material. And also tune into the program. Character Matters here every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central Time, where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that's plaguing much of the world, and what we can do about it. This is something that concerns everybody because our freedoms are at stake, folks. Great countries are built when people are of good character. They build great societies. And our society is in danger of losing its greatness. So let's help restore that. Let's do what we can. And tune in again next week for another edition. I'll see you then.